welcome to my domain, mortals and immortals. It is I, Luke. Thank you for coming to this video, and let's enjoy the show. Okay, as upon seeing my title and the thumbnail, my sexy thumbnail that it took 500 years to make, well, it's a certain discussion that I feel like I can probably have some qualifications to talk about it. What are my qualifications? Well, I don't have a gender. I ate it. It was very, very delicious. Or I probably left it in the womb. I don't know what happened, but I'm non-binary. Half joke. That's a joke that I just kind of make a lot anytime. You don't need to hear my explanation. I'm non-binary. That's the point. That's it. That's the entire video. I'm non-binary. Bye. Okay. Jokes aside, I'm non-binary, but another qualification is that I am of that community, the Hispanic Latino community. So I feel like my opinion may hold more weight. And you might be wondering, why would your opinion hold a lot more weight? You're not the fucking god or something. Bitch, I might be. You don't know that. I am a menace. I've never made a video like this before, and I am a problem. Good to know. Anyways, the point I'm making in this video is to talk about the term Latinx. And you might be wondering, what the fuck is Latinx? And you're absolutely right. What the fuck is that? Before I start explaining it, I'm just gonna say my opinion. I fucking hate it. I despise it with my entire little existence. And before we address anything further, let's talk about what Latinx is. Latinx is supposed to be a gender-neutral term coined from an unknown source, which from the research, from what I try to look up, is coined by Americans in the US. Basically replace the Latino or Latina aspect. And instead of using an O or an A, we add an X to kind of be like a placeholder. So it's pronounced Latinx. Here's where the problem lies. People who think Latinx is a good term to use to replace that, I have a question for you. Did you actually bring Latin people in this conversation? For Latino, Latina kind of thing, I'm just gonna use the word Latinos, just because it is I'm not gonna use any gender neutral terms. I'm just gonna use Latinos because that is grammatically correct, and I will go in depth with my opinion later on. So, it feels like Latinos were not involved in this conversation. It was just the queer community, which specifically I would say the non-binary community aspect. The thing, the reason I say I feel like there was no involvement with the Latino community was because if there was involvement, Latinx would not be as used as it is today. I mean, I know it's not completely used as much, but it's still heavily used compared to another term, which is Latine. Sorry, I have like drool on my mouth. So, and you might be wondering, what's that? That is another term for, instead of Latino or Latina, it's Latine. And if you want to hear my opinion on that, I strongly prefer that so much more to Latinx. What would I call myself? Honestly, I don't care personally. Call me a Latino, call me a Latina, call me a Latine. But which one I would use personally? I interswapped them so many times just because Spanish is a gendered language, and I'm so used to the masculine and feminine terms that like gender neutral does not come into my brain in Spanish. But honestly, if someone referred to the Latin community, the Latino community as Latina community, I would actually be okay with that. Especially as a non-binary Latina, Latino, Latine, Olay. But here's the thing: there's been a couple of videos that when people try to defend Latina or Latinx, when people defend that, they say like it's actually more inclusive than exclusive. People should have a right to have a term that fits properly towards them. Okay, I believe in the latter, and there should be a more inclusive term, or as inclusive as possible, because yes, Spanish is a very gendered language. Everything has some sort of gender, not a gender, but it's like it's gonna, but grammatically it has a gender. Everything has a gender, grammatically wise. Blah blah blah. Fuck you. I can't speak. And so we're using we are so comfortable with masculine or feminine terms. Hence, with the with Latin and Latino and Latina. And there's not much say where with the Latinx community. You might be wondering, why not just use Latino? That is also gender neutral. Here's the thing. In a gender neutral aspect, it only works if it's a mixed company. So if there's like, let's say, 3 women, um, it'll be tres muchachas or tres mujeres. But if there's like 3 guys, it'd be like tres hombres, tres muchachos. Yes, we could have personas, and personas is kind of gender fluid. It's usually feminine, but it could go either way, if I recall correctly. I may be a Spanish speaker, but I don't take a chair proper pronoun. I'm bad at that. I'm not sorry. I'm going to get killed, aren't I? I'm going to get bombarded by a lot of Hispanics. Oopsie. I should probably write a script because my brain is all over the place. Send help. I had to pause for a moment because my brain lagged. But anyways, there should be a gender inclusive way to referring Latinos who don't actually identify as masculine or feminine. And like I said, that's usually in a group of mixed company. That's the only time you would use that in a context. Because let's say like, oh, even if it's just one man there, it'd be like, the 3 women and 1 man, it'd be like los muchachos or los gentes. La gente. You know what? I'm not gonna worry too much about that. Las gentes sounds a lot better, but I'm making horrible examples. Talk about the context of multiple people, mixed company. It'd be like, even if it's just 1 man there in a group of women, it would still lean towards the masculine term because it's mixed company. And that's the closest thing we have to androgyny. But when it comes to singular term, it leads towards masculinity. And it is just very, for people who don't lean towards masculine or feminine, they're gonna feel dysphoric, they're gonna feel misgendered. And I guess that's where Latinx came in. But here's the thing: being inclusive means respecting the culture and the LGBTQ plus community. It needs to involve both. And Latinx excludes the Spanish speaking aspect. It excludes the Hispanic aspect. It excludes the Latino aspect. It just felt like they were not involved in the conversation at all. And so many people are taking that to heart by constantly using the term Latinx to try to be inclusive. But you're not being inclusive, would borderline lean into racism. And here's the thing, like especially in the US, they've taken so many cultures, so many things and claim it as their own or try to use quote unquote inspiration. And we have a lot of outrage on that, like, oh, with Native Americans, with immigrants. There's a lot of outrage for that. Why is there not proper outrage about the term Latinx? Like, I get it, you don't want to come off as homophobic, but here's the thing. You cannot say Latinx in Spanish. That's why there's a problem in that aspect. You cannot say Latinx in Spanish. Latinx. That's how the English speakers would expect us to say it. But those are like non-Spanish speakers expecting us to speak in that format. Doesn't that seem a little exclusive? Do we not get a say in this? That's why I much prefer the term Latine. Look, in English, Latine. In Spanish, Latine. It is the closest thing to the gender-neutral form ever. It usually does lean a tiny bit towards masculine, but like it doesn't follow like a standard rule or breaks any form of rule, so it doesn't really matter if it's masculine or feminine. It is very gender inclusive, and it's very culturally inclusive. What about the pronouns? Like, are we doing Alex stuff? I don't know. That just dismantles the entire language. Ella, ellamos. See, that rolls off the tongue much more appropriately. It's gender inclusive. Ellamos would be a bunch of non-binary, like it could be a bunch of non-binary people, or it's more gender inclusive without trying to make masculine seem gender neutral, quote unquote. I'm not saying everybody needs to use ellamos. I'm not saying that. Ellos should still be just as fine. But the point is, what about the singular term pronouns? We have él, we have ella. But what about the singular term? Ax, that doesn't freaking work. Ella is much more appropriate. Yes, I know in French, ella is female from when I looked up, but this is not French we're talking about. This is Spanish. And here's the reason I'm not mentioning people who speak Portuguese in this conversation is I myself do not speak Portuguese, so I feel like it's inappropriate for me to speak on behalf of people who speak Portuguese. But based on what I looked at, Latinx is not gonna work for Portuguese language either, based on what I've looked up. I could definitely be wrong. Anyone who speaks Portuguese, you could probably give me your perspective. How would you pronounce it? Please, no transphobia in the comments. I'm doing my best to show that I despise the term Latinx, but also be respectful to everybody else, especially as someone who is from the queer community. Please, none of that bigotry in my comments, please. If you do, I will steal your gender, and I will feed it to my many, many hungry demons that lives in my basement. They're hungry for their gender. They're hungry for transphobes. But yes, it is very, very disrespectful. There's nothing inclusive about Latinx. If you want something inclusive, make sure you study the language before trying to add any level of inclusivity aside. And yes, there's people saying like, oh, if you don't like the term Latinx, you're just stuck in the old ways. I'm not stuck in the old ways. Like I said, Latina is significantly better. I would use Latina. Honestly, call me Latina. Call me a Latina. I'm perfectly okay with that. If you're like, oh, I'm not gonna call you that, I'm gonna call you Latino, or I'm calling you Latina because fuck you. That doesn't bother me personally. So what are you gonna do about it? Otherwise, oh yeah, and also another thing. I know I did came semi-unprepared, but I would also put like a link down below for a video for people to watch to give more details on why X would not work the way English speakers expect it to work. So please, I'm speaking mainly to the queer community. Latinos, do whatever the fuck you want. Just don't be a bigot. That's all I ask. Do whatever the fuck you want. Please, queer community, Please, anyone who's in the queer community, anyone who's an ally, please stop using the term Latinx. Please use Latina. And if you don't understand why Latina is better than Latinx after watching my entire video, I don't know what to tell you. Except that you're probably being racist. and you might be wondering what makes it so racist. Well, if you were not paying attention to the entire video, you're fucking excluding the goddamn language! Anyways, I think I'm done here. I'm going to go and think about my life choices. I hate it. Anyways, catch you on the flip side, mortals and immortals, and peace out.